All right. Are we allowed for our audience to hear ice cubes on this?
Oh, yeah.
A little context, listeners.
What's going on?
It's the hottest day of the year. Ugh. And we are in a house with all the fans turned off so that you, dear listener, can have a high sound quality.
For you. We're doing this
for you. We're suffering for you.
You're welcome.
And we have iced coffee, and I refuse to give that up. So you're going to hear a rattling of ice cubes throughout this episode.
Yep. But no fans.
Ooh.
You may hear droplets of sweat hitting the table.
It's not actually that hot in here. I feel like it's fine.
It feels hot to me.
Okay. It's going to get hot. Well, maybe that's just because I'm in here.
It's getting hot.
Sarah.
Yes, Alex?
What do you think would be more romantic? Me like blasting a boombox on the front lawn or leaving chocolates on your pillow?
Good question. I think blasting a boombox on my pillow, please.
Okay. So you want the chocolates on the front lawn.
And the chocolates on the front lawn.
Boombox on the pillow. Got it.
So next time you can't sleep, you could just do that.
I'll see you at 2 a.m.
Yeah, sounds great. Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer, non-monogamous therapist, parent, writer, podcaster, and helpless romantic, hopeless romantic. What's the one? What's the one that's cute and not pathetic?
They're all cute when you do them. I'm her husband, Alex, a communications professional. I mostly work at home these days, so I think the pinnacle of romance is somebody folding the giant mountain of laundry that's sitting on our couch, so I don't have to look at it during my workday.
And it's amazing how that opportunity just always exists in our lives. For the grandest romantic gesture, it's just always there.
It's just right there.
Asking, would you like to do this today?
And the answer is...
No.
At least it wasn't yesterday.
It's, I feel like, really under-recognized as a renewable resource. Laundry.
We could power the world with the eternal mountain of laundry on our couch.
The neglect, the energy of neglect.
Inertia.
Could move mountains. Yeah, inertia.
But not mountains of laundry.
No, definitely not.
I'm Jessica here producing, resident monogamist. I agree that folding laundry is basically the height of romance. It's incredible. And like we said, there's always a chance to do more.
There's always a chance for romance. That's not a real song. I'm going to just make it up.
So we're talking about romance today.
Sorry, if it wasn't obvious.
If you couldn't tell.
Today's topic is romance.
What do we mean?
What a topic.
What do we mean when we
We're
say
going to
that?
talk about what we mean, and we're going to talk about how it fits into a non-monogamous context and explain to you, the listener, how you can be romantic even without conscriptive monogamy and relationship escalators.
Is it possible? Let's find out.
Let's find out. I'm based on what we have for the script. We're probably not going to explain it. We will explore.
You know, I think the good news is nobody is tuning into this podcast because they think that we're going to land on an explanation. Season
Done.
4, it hasn't happened yet.
Solved. Figured it out. Check the box.
Truths lie within. Just
like,
listen.
Yeah, we know the arc. You start with one question and then you summarize by having identified 150 questions. And then you do your outro.
So yeah, what do we mean when we talk about romance, Sarah?
Yeah, so this has come up in a couple of corners of my life recently with clients and with people I've dated, where there is just this question of what is romance? Like we kind of have a cultural script around it that we were alluding to in our little jokey intro, or like it's lingerie and chocolates and roses and gestures and satin sheets, and you know, there's like a lot of images that kind of pop into your head that are kind of cultural images that have been placed there.
Right. There's a whole holiday
There's an entire holiday, right? And I have found, at least when I've tried to interrogate it with people, whether it's clients or partners, it's like sand through our fingers. It's like, yeah, what do we mean? We start talking about sex, right? Or we kind of talk about those cultural scripts, or we talk about that feeling of butterflies in your stomach and someone's making declarations and like, you know, doing gestury things and you don't know if you like it or not. Like that has kind of come up. And so I think that just got me contemplating if the way we define romance in this kind of not super interrogated way has some kind of toxic, monogamous, maybe sexist qualities that are worth pulling out so we can see what else is there.
As you're saying that, it's making me think about how all of those gestures and cultural scripts kind of are circling around trying to entice somebody to change their life or their like sort of like relationship structure or where they are and like move towards you in some sort of like meaningful way.
That's interesting.
Which is interesting when, I mean, that's obviously kind of what happens in all of the narrative scripts around romance and like moving from being single to moving in together and getting married and stuff like that. Those are all things that like a romantic gesture would like be the thing that marked your transition or kind of enticed you into that transition. But what about when you're in a context where what you want is, you know, stability?
Or you want exploration, but without a kind of like goal in mind. I also, what I hear in that is the assumption that you're kind of trying to convince someone. You're making an argument for something.
I can afford chocolates and thought to purchase them, and thus you should spend your life with me.
And obviously there's gender elements to this because in every cultural script and story, it's like the woman is skeptical about the man. And then the man has to kind of like pull her towards him, convince her of something through romance and romantic gestures. And we, again, like alluded to those at the top of the episode. And we're going to get into some of our favorite cinematic depictions of those.
Maybe we should dive right into those right now.
Let's do
it
it.
Seems like you're making me think about them. So like there's, you know, romance has this whole genre, the romantic comedy, right? And I feel like sometimes they're funny and sometimes they're not, but it's just a genre that is the
Sometimes they're insanely toxic.
yeah.
And you like go back and watch it and be like, oh my God.
Yeah. And like as I was thinking about this, like there's like the story usually follows this progression of like there's like a meet cute between the two main characters, and then like, you know, maybe there's like a denial of the call or whatever, but eventually they like move through that and they like escalate the relationship, and then, you know, in the last 30 minutes there's like some kind of rupture in that relationship, and it's like they're going to be apart, and then there's a grand gesture usually by the man to the woman to like reaffirm their like commitment and desire and like accept that they want to have the relationship, which again is probably a transformative relationship where they're moving in their, you know, from one phase of their life to another phase of their life together.
Yeah.
And it always goes that way, pretty much, right?
It pretty much does. Yeah. So what's your favorite version of that?
Well, the
story.
the most iconic imagery I think from a romantic comedy movie is like John Cusack holding the boombox on the lawn with the trench coat from Say Anything.
Certainly for our generation.
Yeah. And that movie takes place in Seattle.
Oh, really?
It's like, I think it's one of the first Cameron Crowe movies. Rom-com auteur, who I think is kind of annoying in some ways, but
What else did he go on to direct?
Singles and
Also in Seattle.
Almost Famous, and there's some other ones. Can't quite remember the other ones. But
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
IMDb that shit. But yeah, anyway, and Say Anything, I think the reason that I think it's interesting and like it is, I mean, first of all, like the main Cusack character is like the best character ever, and he has some like really good like speeches. He's sort of like countercultural Gen X icon. He's like sort of like a loser, but not really a loser, he's like alty. He like is not playing by the rules mainstream. He's like one of the things I was reading about it called him an underachiever, but he's like achieving in his own way, and he like wants to be a professional kickboxer, and he like but it's interesting, not to go on too much of a tangent. He is like a little bit like queer. Like he has female friends. He's always depicted like hanging out with his female friends.
That's
and like
right.
playing guitar, and like he is at odds with there's a bunch of scenes where he's like talking to his male friends, and his male friends are like giving him toxic relationship advice and
Right.
like misogyny, and he's like rejecting that. So I think it's a good movie for those reasons. And then
It sounds to me like part of what is interesting about this movie is that it is actually attempting to examine and maybe even redefine young masculinity at this moment of cultural turmoil and change.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can see the kind of like prototype of some of the alt men who would come out of Seattle in particular in the 90s. And
Yes.
the ways that they were seen as really challenging some of those masculine norms.
yeah, and then like the arc of the movie, I think is a little off script from that. I mean, there's a lot of it, but it's like he pursues this high achieving straight A student who's like a pretty girl, and she like accepts his pursuit kind of in an unexpected way, and then her dad, who owns a funeral home,
Right.
played by Fraser's dad, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Martin Crane.
Martin Crane.
Played by Martin Crane, weirdly. Fraser just shows up. He, initially sort of like, oh, the dad's a single dad.
Right. There's a dead mom.
I think they're divorced.
Oh,
and
okay.
she's chosen to live with the dad. So she's like connected to the dad and has made this like affirmed choice to like trust the dad. And then the dad like rejects John Cusack, Lloyd Dobler, and is like, he's not right for you. He's like a loser. You're about to go away to college. You should like be, focusing on that. He's just not really good enough for you.
I see.
And then, spoiler alert, the dad is revealed to be not trustworthy in this way, that he's been stealing money from his clients, the elderly. And
So a crisis of like the patriarch.
yeah, a crisis of the patriarch. And then she basically, like, after rejecting Lloyd Dobler, like this rupture that they have where she's like, no, I'm going to break up with you and, go away to college. And
I don't
follow
trust
this
your
path.
vision of patriarchy and masculinity. I'm going to go with my father's instead.
Yeah. Then she, at the end, they come back together and she reaccepts him. And I think that there's some allusion to the dad ending up being okay with that too. But point being, it's interesting because I think from a story perspective, she's actually kind of the central character. Like she has more of an arc, or maybe they both do, but like.
Well, I think it's complicated. Her actions are the kind of like incite. There's a lot of incitement that she is responsible for in the story, it sounds like. But the arc is all about moving from one framework of patriarchy into another.
Yeah.
And which one is she choosing? And kind of at the end, it's like, do you choose your dad's or do you choose this young man's? And you're kind of like going back and forth to see which one seems more trustworthy and like the kind of better investment.
Yeah. And better at caring for her. And the last scene is like she's afraid of flying and they're like on a plane, presumably to run away together or whatever. And then he's like soothing her as she's like afraid of the plane taking off.
So even though he's alternative, he is still capable of being like a
Masculine.
Yeah.
Protector.
But also he's very romantic.
For example, like what is there's like this the image of the boombox on the lawn. Like, can we talk about that for a second? Because when we're talking romantic gestures, I feel like people in our demographic, if this were Family Feud, like romantic gestures, it would be the boombox on the lawn for so many of us. Would be
I
the
don't
number one
actually
choice.
remember how that fits into the story, but I assume that it's when he's trying to win her back. Do you remember, Jessica?
Yeah, no, that's all I remember. When he's trying to win her back, he goes and plays. I don't know what their favorite
In
song.
your eyes, the light, the heat.
Your eyes.
I am complete.
Your eyes.
1,000 churches
Your-
burning. Right?
Yes, Peter Gabriel. I don't know.
Fucking great song.
Yeah, because of the scene. Oh yeah, and then the name of the movie is because the dad tells her that she can say anything to him. Like he's like says that to like establish this like ultimate trust between them, but then he like breaks that trust.
I see.
Anyway, that is
Interesting.
my treatise about Say Anything and why it's a good movie.
Okay, well, I do have a thing to say about the gesture on the lawn.
Speaking of things and saying them,
I would like to say anything about this.
or rather something specific.
We'll have to go back and look at the clip. But I remember about this that there's a little bit of him being really pushy and like not respectful of boundaries that she's asking for. And so I kind of want to just, I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, that she's like, I don't want to see you anymore. I need space. Leave me alone. And he's like, what if instead I show up in the middle of the night on your lawn with a boombox?
Yeah, and that is like the trope, right? And it's kind of almost maybe not the origin of that trope, but it's like a central one. And then it's like, as the viewer of the movie, that she is in doubt about her decision to break up with him. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't know that.
He doesn't know
If
that.
you were
know
a
that.
person in the
Yeah.
world trying to emulate Lloyd Dobler's behavior, you'd be fucking up because she just told you, leave me alone, and then you drove onto her lawn and blasted music in a boombox. Like anybody who ever did that IRL, no, it wasn't a good idea.
It's not a good idea.
It's like
Don't get on a plane with them.
stalking behavior. It's not. It's not appropriate.
Yeah, and I think the other theme I'm just noticing here is in all of this, it's kind of the message that the woman can't trust her instincts, and like she kind of needs to outsource them to men.
Right.
She's not right. She's not right about the guy she's interested in, according to her father. She's not right about her father being trustworthy. She's not right about wanting to take a break from the boyfriend. She's not. It's just, in the end, it's the men who are deciding for her what is actually right.
Yeah.
And then Lloyd is like, there are some things that I like about like what he does in the movie, like in the beginning of like just deciding, it's like he's asking out somebody who's out of his league, basically. And like, that's an interesting thing to think about, like that there are leagues. And then you would have to be really...
By the way, I find that very not romantic. The concept of leagues.
Well, and then you would have to like achieve some high level of romance, I guess, or illustrate your worthiness. But he does that in an alti way.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
Yeah, it's a little
Bummer.
Yeah. What's your favorite rom-com, Sarah?
Speaking of
If
problematic.
mine's so problematic.
Mine is beyond reproach. Mine is The Graduate, which I'd have to look up some of the stats. I would not have necessarily identified this as my favorite rom-com, but when we were talking about it, I'm like, it's the one I've probably seen the most. And it was the first that came to mind. So for those who haven't seen it, it's from...
I think it's like 1969.
I was going to say the late 60s.
Yeah.
And it's about a young man played by Dustin Hoffman. I think it is. I like get chills just thinking about Dustin Hoffman in this role as I talk about it. I think he is so brilliant in it and so hilarious. He's probably like 35
Yeah, he's way
in
too
real
old,
life, but
right?
he's playing someone who just graduated from college.
Right.
And he's coming back to his affluent, white, suburban family to figure out what to do with his life, all to the soundtrack of Simon and Garfunkel. And he has no idea what to do with his life until he meets Mrs. Robinson, the 40-something-year-old neighbor next door who's in an unsatisfying marriage and also having a bit of an existential crisis herself. And so then they embark on an affair together, which... I'd have to go back and watch this, but I feel like the content of the affair is really kind of thin. I don't remember, like, there's obviously sexual content and the sense that they have a sexual connection that is very meaningful to the both of them. But like the emotional content, I'm trying to remember like conversations they have about like who they are and why they're interested in each other, and nothing is really coming to mind. It's just like kind of the taboo of the sex and the older woman is really like front and center there.
Yeah.
And it's like transactional, I think, is how it's presented.
How do you mean?
Just, it's like, yeah, it's like almost like they're making a point of there not being a lot of content between them.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, she's just like trying to do something off script, and I guess so is he.
Oh my gosh. And it's the actress playing Mrs. Robinson is
And Bancroft, right?
Is it Anne Bancroft? It's Anne Bancroft.
Yeah, I think so.
I can hear her
Is it?
saying his name, Benjamin,
Oh my God. Yes.
like in her smoker's voice. Oh God, so good. Look it up.
She's incredible. Yeah.
So what's interesting though about that romantic comedy, if you want to call it that, is that there's actually 2 arcs. So in the first, and spoiler to anyone who hasn't seen it, in the first arc, there's the romance between Benjamin and Mrs. Robinson, and a hotel scene when they first hook up that I think is one of the funniest scenes in all movies ever. When he tries to kiss her, but she still has smoke in her mouth.
So good.
Anyway.
Yeah, and he like grabs her breast.
It's just like this.
Yeah, it's really good.
And then he like turns the light on and then off and then on again because he's trying to figure out what would be the most romantic lighting. Anyway, it me in so many new relationships that I've had in the past 5 years.
It is. We should rewatch it just for the like depiction of your orientation towards like romance and casual sex as a person in their 40s.
Right.
You know,
And
because
how
she just
different it is.
doesn't give a
Right.
fuck.
She doesn't give a single fuck.
She's like, oh my God, can we please just
Do what we came to do.
do what we came to do? That's like literally a line from the movie.
Yeah. So there's that whole relationship arc, and interestingly enough, there is this sense that the whole community is pushing Benjamin towards a romance with Mrs. Robinson's daughter Elaine,
Right.
while they're also having this affair.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she's presented as like the solution to his like existential malaise and.
Elaine and plastics.
Yeah.
The recommendation is that he
Plastics.
marry Elaine and go into plastics if he wants to have a successful life. So, anyway, Elaine discovers, so he's like going on dates with Elaine, but he's
Right.
not really into it. And then Elaine is kind of confused and hurt, and then
And
discovers
he's kind of like mean to her.
he's kind of
right?
mean to
Yeah, he's
her,
trying to like drive her away.
driving
Yeah.
her away. She discovers that he's been having an affair with her mother, and then kind of runs away to college in Berkeley
Right.
in a cute little like white roadster with her like blonde hair. It's a banner just like flying behind her. She goes across the Golden Gate Bridge. Simon and Garfunkel is playing.
Yeah.
So good. Anyway. Now, then it's like he comes down to apologize to her and like make amends, and things have
Yeah.
ended with Mrs. Robinson, and they have some kind of romantic time of their own that is just a montage of them walking around on the Berkeley campus.
Yeah.
And then in the final act of the movie, it's revealed that Elaine will be marrying someone more in her league, if you will, instead of like this like short, weird,
Yeah.
existentially lost dude who has sex with 45-year-old women. It's like this buff, blonde, big, like
Yeah, toothy.
toothy football player or something. And they're going to go get married. And Dustin Hoffman is like, the hell they are. And in another romantic gesture that I think of as like probably, you know, in the canon,
The romantic gesture to end all
Yes,
romantic
yes.
gestures.
he goes and interrupts the marriage and like pounds on the church window and yells, you know, stop. And the marriage is stopped. And Elaine runs out in her wedding dress and they hop on a city bus together, and they've like escaped all of these expectations for their lives through this romantic gesture. And then in the final scenes, they sort of look at each other and then look away and then look at the camera. And it's clear that they both deeply regret. They're on that bus with each other.
I mean, it's open to interpretation.
Well-
I think that is the point. It's so classic and amazing because there's no dialogue, and so you're sort of like just.
Who made that movie?
But it's you question that, and like the time between, the romantic gesture and the fallout, and this is what never happens in rom-coms. You never get, the last scene that is like the fallout, what actually happened after they decided to run away. And actually, I think the last scene in Say Anything is maybe a poor callback to that. Like they're on a mode of transportation,
Interesting.
sitting together, like
Fascinating.
leaving. But in that one, it's really like, this is the right thing to do. And in The Graduate, I bet people Rorschach test the last scene of The Graduate all the time. And some people watch it and are like, and then they were happy.
Right.
And some people watch it and are
totally.
like, hello, darkness,
My old friend, I've come to talk with you again.
Yeah, there is no escape, and romance is only a cruel hoax.
And in case it hasn't been clear in my summary of this movie, my riding off into the sunset would have happened with Mrs. Robinson.
Yes.
Wow. So you are Dustin Hoffman riding off into the sunset with Mrs. Robinson. That's
But I want to
interesting.
have a queer affair with Mrs.
I
Robinson.
want to have a queer affair with Lloyd Dobler.
I love this for
Yeah,
us.
that's great.
Yeah, great. We're gonna fan fiction this.
Yeah.
We're gonna make millions.
Yes.
Okay,
it's like
Jessica.
we're kickboxing together, and then
then
oh no, he kicked me in the face. I have to.
and then you're like playing your favorite songs for each other on the boombox.
Yeah, I make him a mixtape in the boombox.
Yeah.
Cute.
And me and Mrs. Robinson are just having like weird avant-garde sex in hotel rooms across the country
In
in
1967.
1960s.
I assume that that's what most of your dates are like.
Please
Yeah,
continue
same.
assuming that.
Yeah. Cool.
Everyone out there also continue assuming that.
Except without the awkwardness.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the sex Mrs. Robinson should have been having.
Yeah. The sex she deserved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Jessica,
All right.
What about you? What's your favorite romantic comedy?
Well, I mean, my favorite movie of all time is Wayne's World.
That's right. She's even got a tattoo.
I do. And I don't think of it as a rom-com, but
Defies genre.
It defies genre.
It's really all
you know,
genres.
I mean, I think of it as the Citizen Kane of movies.
Wait a minute. Okay. I just need to check something out there.
Yeah. But I guess I was just thinking through the plot as you guys described yours, and I was like, oh, it is a romantic comedy. And not even, I want it to be between Wayne and Garth, but it's not. I mean, it's just
No, that's a very mostly
a very precise.
attached, well-regulated.
Oh, yeah. Wayne and
relationship.
Garth. Yeah.
There's conflict.
I mean, they do.
There's
have
a rupture
moment.
that they repair.
There is a
Yeah.
rupture. Yeah.
Wow.
Because Wayne kind of. Well, is it over money? Yeah, it's over money. It's not because.
And what to do with their show?
Wayne leaves him
Yeah.
at the show.
Wayne leaves him at the show. Right.
It's not
Sorry,
because of Cassandra.
Not because of Cassandra. That's, the two reasons that
Yeah.
could leave each other, right?
Interesting that this is the one movie we've talked about that is directed by a woman.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
Penelope
also,
Spheres.
I was thinking about how our little mini canon here is incredibly white
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true.
and really also speaks to our generation in that respect.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, I don't know. Like, this is maybe not related, but I think the other thing that was just really coming up for me in the conversation so far today was how there's supposed to be like surprise baked into romance, and that we really sort of see that as like I mean, the grand gesture is often a surprise.
Yeah.
So in the case of Wayne's World, he gets his girlfriend after the rupture. He gets her an audition with a big record label executive, right? That's the grand gesture. And so I guess that's like pretty clearly a good surprise, right?
Right.
But I think like such a common trope is like someone is leaving on a jet plane. And then there's like a scene of sort of chasing them down to like reach them at the airport.
Which Wayne does. He goes and gets her at the video shoot.
That's true. That's true. He gets her at the
She's
video
with
shoot.
another Benjamin.
So many Benjamins.
Benjamin. I rewatched Wayne's World with somebody who had never seen it. I mean, this was a couple years ago now. And so that gave me like sort of fresh eyes.
And she's a little younger than us.
Yeah. And also has just not watched a lot of movies that normal people have watched. Sorry.
I I mean, I feel like it is a generational thing.
Yeah, it could be. Also, just not spoiled by all of this toxic shit, because my conclusion was the story is pretty, like, what Wayne's behavior is poor in relationship to Cassandra, and it's like he just, goes straight from, like, working really hard to, like, win her over by learning Cantonese and, like, supporting her career, and then he gets extremely jealous extremely quickly and starts trying to undermine her right away.
Right,
and,
immediately.
like, that's the source of the rupture.
Based on no evidence.
Based on no evidence. Yeah, he just can't. It's, like, basically the story of, like, a guy who can't hang with being in a relationship with somebody who he perceives as better than him.
Right, out of his league.
Out of his league, yeah.
Right.
But he needs more Lloyd Dobler energy. He's just like too unconfident and undermines himself.
Interesting.
And yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, and it is interesting that the Benjamin in this case, is a creep and is trying to steal his girlfriend, but his girlfriend would never go for a creep like Benjamin.
He's autonomous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's a whole ass person.
Do you think you see that there's a woman director behind that movie? Because she is like a kind of consistent, well-developed character who follows her own path throughout, and is not necessarily swayed by what the men in her life want of her or want to extract from her.
Yeah, she's got her eyes on the prize.
Which is a record deal with Sharp Records.
Yeah, Frankie Sharp, Sharp Records.
Okay, so thank you for going on that little cultural walk with us about our favorite movies. I think the themes that we've pulled out of these rom-coms is this idea that there is usually like a kind of push-pull that makes people uncomfortable. There's some sort of big gesture that is both a surprise and, again, maybe like pushes people's boundaries in ways that don't feel great. And there's absolutely no exploration of what happens after that gesture. It's just kind of like the stories move towards that gesture happens. There's a tiny denouement, and we have no idea.
Yeah, it's like a story of escalation with some tumult in it.
Okay, so obviously all of these movies are conscripted, heterosexuality, and monogamy.
Yeah, like why wasn't Benjamin dating Mrs. Robinson and her daughter? Edgy take.
Hot take!
Wow.
If they were truly free, can a mother and daughter be metamors?
No.
Whoa.
No, thank you.
How about this?
Wow, I'm just imagining how annoyed I would be if my mom was dating one of my
so
partners.
annoying. Are Wayne, Garth, and Cassandra in a throuple?
In a throuple. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Wayne's deep relationship with Garth as something that does not threaten his relationship with Cassandra and vice versa. Seems like it is. There's some polyaffirming content there.
Yeah, there could be. Unspoken.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've kind of identified some of these toxic scripts, and now we're asking the question of how do these apply or not apply to polyamory? What is romance, or what does it feel like if you're really trying to not follow those scripts, or if they don't apply to the kind of relationships that you have, stage of life that you're in, who you are.
Yeah, and I think that starts to beg the question of why do people, other than this cultural sort of influence programming, why do people want romance? Like, what do they like about, what is the positive feeling of romance?
I think to be seen as valuable and wanted. At bottom, probably. The sense that in a world of people, this person has identified you.
They've chosen you.
They've chosen you as the person that they want, and they will go to great lengths to show you that. I'm not obtuse about what is appealing about that.
Yeah. And then there's also the like feeling that gives you. That's kind of what I was like, I think you're right, but what I was kind of driving at is this like feeling of like butterflies, like this excitement that is like maybe a different kind of excitement than, any other that you experience in other parts of your life or like ways, right?
The butterflies. So that is one of the things that has come up as, I think, an important lens for exploring romance. I cannot take credit for this. This is just something that I've kind of noticed on therapist Instagram and in my own therapist's office. This question of whether or not butterflies, that kind of feeling of fizzy excitement, do they like me? Do I like them? Where is this going? Push, pull, that we have, at least I have always assumed was like a truth beyond beyond reproach, that it's just true. That means something, and what that means is important and good, and you should definitely like follow that feeling. Courageously follow that feeling, because it means that like the relationship has chemistry and potential that cannot be denied. And so more recently, I've seen people asking if those feelings are in fact signs of establishing disordered attachment.
Right.
And the sense of not being safe. And if it's actually your nervous system responding to this feeling like, I don't know if I'm safe here. I don't know if this is actually moving at the right pace. I don't know how I feel about this person or how this person feels about me. And we're in this kind of like jockeying for position almost, or power. So I want to name that and then just like offer it back to the two of you and see what comes up for you. Because I have to say that was like when I heard it, it was both very challenging to me and also felt right.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's like really comforting to hear that, or it like clarifies a lot, because I think I kept coming back to like, there's like the new relationship energy romance that you feel, and then there's like the romance that I feel when you just cook me dinner, make stir fry.
Yeah.
And I just suddenly don't have to cook anything, right? But it's not like, ooh, that, it's not like a surprise that you care about me.
You're like, whoa, Sarah really likes me.
Like, ooh, do you think she's into me? I'm like, I know she is. She wants to be my best friend forever.
And she had the ingredients to make extra stir fry and thought of you in that context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm also providing the service of using up ingredients that she wanted to get out of her fridge.
It's a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're kind of identifying that in new relationship energy, you don't know the people yet that well.
Right.
And so there is kind of inevitably a lack of security, maybe. What do you all think?
Yeah, well, if I may, this is making me think about like in early relationships, sometimes a point of, I don't know if it's a point of contention for us, but like something that has come up before is just like the feeling that like you would do something for the other person, this new person, that you wouldn't do for me, or vice versa. Like, why would you want to cook dinner for somebody else? Why would I want to cook dinner?
Are you cooking dinner for other people?
See what I mean? No, that's actually, if I'm cooking dinner for somebody, then I'm ending the relationship through the terrible dinner cooking that I'm doing, trying to drive them away. But you know what I mean? Like you would do things in a new relationship that you wouldn't do, romantic things that you wouldn't do in an established relationship. And if you're the person, who's in the established relationship, like that kind of sucks. Like it just like feels.
You're still like trying to impress someone or like show them a version of yourself that maybe isn't your like most integrated, most consistent version, but it's a part of yourself that it feels good to show off.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that either.
No, I don't think so either. But it's a contrast that like is acute, it's stark,
Right.
That you can see. And I think, polyamory allows you to see that because those two things are happening concurrently, right? Like if you're in a long marriage and you're like, the romance is gone, it's kind of like, well, you can't remember exactly what it was like, or like that's taken a long time to happen.
The romance is now folding laundry and doing taxes, right?
The romance has transformed.
It's transformed.
I will say. It is not gone. It has changed, shifted to something more valuable. If somebody I was in a newer relationship with came over and folded my laundry, I'd be like, weird flex, but yes.
I want to be really clear
That's
that I am
romantic.
super open to that.
On board.
But then it is complicated because, in new relationships, for me, Yeah, it is so complicated. Obviously, in my life here at home with children and a lot of community and a lot of responsibilities, and my work is like that too, and but other elements of my life from like my court case, it's just like a lot of really needing to show up and be responsible, integrated, adult, dependable, all of those things. And it's true that with a new relationship, there is a part of me that wants to show a different side of myself, something that is more wild and kind of less dependable. And I'm just like, I got plenty of that dependable shit going on.
Yeah.
I know that I'm valuable to people in that way, but I think sometimes other parts of me don't know if like they still get to be expressed.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to offer that here too.
And so what if the
I
romantic...
got like a little bit of the manic pixie dream girl thing going on sometimes, and I know it, And I think if the two of you saw me in that context, you would be like, wow.
Yeah.
I
This
find
manic
you to be very
pixie dream
manic.
girl has to wake up at 5:30 tomorrow morning. Does she know that?
Yeah. What if doing all of that is the process of, and maybe this is kind of what the theory you're citing was saying, is the process of tricking somebody into accepting you for, like, showing them your best self so that they will accept you for your worst self. You know what I mean? Like that is what sort of romancing somebody is, and what you're trying to do is slowly move them closer to somebody who is, I guess at worst, is unable to escape who you really are, or at best is like seeing who you really are and embracing it. But if you showed them that on the very front end, they'd be like, yikes, that's a big fucking pile of laundry over there.
Yeah, get your shit together, lady.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's got to be some like matters of degree here, right? Like if you're pretending to do or be or like a thing that is completely like that you actually hate, that's like, that's not fair, right? That is tricking somebody. I like the example that my go-to example with Curtis, my husband, is that I really like movies. Namely Wayne's World, but also all other movies. And so going to movies together was like a big thing, but like, the 6-hour-long Turkish art film is maybe like a little bit beyond for me. I like to keep it to 3 hours or less. But like in the early dating phase, I would have gone to, and I would have gone to one of those things where you're like watching movies for 36 hours without sleeping or whatever. Sounds like an adventure.
I don't fucking understand why
oh my
Curtis,
God.
He'll never invite me to the Turkish art film.
Yeah.
I'm like, I like going to 6-hour-long Turkish art films.
Yeah.
Fuck,
Because
man.
you probably have a date. Probably in a 1968 era hotel.
With Mrs. Robinson.
Mrs.
Okay.
Robinson.
I do feel like we got away a little
Sorry.
bit from the butterflies feeling.
Yes,
and I wanted to come
butterflies.
back to that.
It
Yes.
made me think about the word limerence, and so I looked it up,
interesting.
and I think that word
Limerence?
basically means that. Limerence is...
Limerence.
Let me just go off the top of my head here. Is a state of mind that involves an obsessive attachment to another person, also known as the limerent object. It can feel like a strong, irrational, and involuntary form of love, and is characterized by a longing for the limerent object's attention and a desire for the relationship to be reciprocated. Limerence is different from love or lust because it's based on the uncertainty of whether the other person also desires you.
Well, yeah, there you go. So
that's
there was a
pretty
word
good.
for it. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the distinction that we're saying is like, we want to use a word, I suppose, discern between limerence, which is, I think that sounds like unhealthy, unsafe attachment to me. That sounds like you don't feel safe in the care and interest of another person, and you don't know how to communicate that back to them. And there is like this push-pull that is exciting, but ultimately like dysregulating and doesn't feel very good. We're looking to discern that from romance. Right? This kind of gets back to the heart of the podcast here, which is we have an entire culture that tells us that feeling is romance. So
That's
what
why
if that feeling is disordered attachment and we still want romance?
and that's why you haven't heard the word limerence before, because it's putting
That shit on
those
blast.
cultural scripts on blast.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
So then what is romance? If you're trying to discern between limerence, that kind of unhealthy, unsafe dysregulation and feeling romantic feelings, new relationship energy, being excited to show someone different sides of yourself. Yeah.
I don't know. And I guess we never will.
And I guess we never will. And in conclusion,
That's it.
that's it. One word that has come up a lot as I've explored this with clients and partners is curiosity. And I think, I don't know if this is universal or personal, but I think for me, someone being curious about me in a way that feels like attuned, and not just about kind of trying to extract information from me to
Manipulate
me, which makes me sound so untrusting. But I do think sometimes in these scripts, especially between men and women, it can feel that way. Like,
sure.
I'm going to get this information, then I'm going to turn it on you and use it in my kind of like,
right.
in this cultivation of
To
limerence.
win you over.
Right.
But
Right.
they're still winning. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like a real curiosity that is not just like me as an object of limerence, right? But is me as a person, where
Yep.
it feels like this person has identified, sees me as someone they're interested in, not someone they're trying to like get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what is the difference between being curious and interested in somebody not as an object and not as an object? Because I can definitely see like what the idea is here is that like, you know, the thing that stuck out most for me about that definition was like the limerent object. It doesn't matter who they are exactly. They're just an object of your desire. So like, what is the other option with somebody that you don't know that well, or you've just met? You know, maybe you've met them in a context where they're sort of like, you know, a dating app, for example, is kind of like intrinsically people objectify themselves in their profiles to present themselves to other people. So like you have to make some kind of transition out of that context, out of that paradigm to see them for who they actually are. So they're not an object.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound pedantic here.
I'm asking you to sound pedantic.
Okay, so I will. So I would like to sound
I'm just a
pedantic,
dumb little object over here. Explain it to me.
but I don't think you ever want to treat people like objects. I think
Yeah.
people are always subjects, and it's just they're subjects you don't know very well.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to suggest that you should. I was just trying to suggest that it's hard not to.
Oh. But I think maybe that it being hard not to has to do with the fear of being rejected. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I think a lot of that, like, I'm going to kind of treat you as this, like, object to get and to, like, woo over to my side so that I don't have to risk feeling rejected in some
So that I'm safe.
so that I'm safe.
Yep.
And it doesn't actually feel like it's an attuned interest or like a kind of compelling presence to what is happening right now and here. We have a close friend, and she says that, you know, what if you considered real kind of romantic courage and real romance as the courage to be confident in potentially liking someone more than they like you, and being okay with how that might unfold. And that is like truly a romantic position to take and gesture towards someone. And I think that's kind of an interesting way of interrupting some of this like cultivation of limerence and the objectification of partners.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, maybe hard to achieve because of insecurity, but like, yeah, imagine that you're meeting people or developing a relationship with someone and your whole orientation is not around how they feel about you, but around how you feel about them.
Right.
Which is the thing that you actually have control of and can embody authentically. Like, you don't have control over how somebody else feels about you.
I would also argue that for me, at least, it's the entire point of polyamory, right? Because I'm not trying to win people over so that I can do this like league jockeying for power and position in my life. I'm trying to get to know people and be known by them and have more opportunities for that type of intimacy.
Yeah, as a counterpoint, I want to say that there is like a very common desire that I can see in myself for emotional safety that is not necessarily a bad thing or isn't like manipulative or objectifying, like at its very core. It's like often kind of conflated and
Right.
can be at an extreme, like that's all I want. And so I don't care about who you are as long as you just give that to me. But trying to get to feel safe with somebody so that you can share yourself with them is, I think, a normal and healthy thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I don't think your safety has to come at the expense of theirs.
Right.
You know, that like that's something that you can cultivate with each other.
Yeah, for sure. But the idea that you would just be able to come with this sort of like pure externalized interest and love, so coming
Sure,
from a
no.
place of absolute security, is like, if somebody came at me with that, I would be creeped.
Right. And I think that's something that you would hold for, one holds for oneself. You're not going around being like, I'm comfortable with loving you more than you love me, which, on day 3 or 4 is like
Right.
pretty,
Just on the dating app.
a lot. It's a lot. But I mean, I think similarly, there has to be a comfort with the possibility that you, in turn, will be really interested in someone or maybe less interested than they are
Yeah.
in you. And that, like, we're kind of, does emotional safety mean that the level of interest is always equal and expressed in exactly the same way? Like, what does it mean for
Well-
you, having identified emotional safety as, like, kind of...
Yeah, that like maybe you're not, that it's okay if you end up not being aligned in that way.
That it's
Right.
okay. And it
and-
doesn't even have to mean the end of the relationship.
Right. Yeah. I think when you're coming from a place of insecurity, and like I think I've been experiencing this recently more than I had in the past, then that can become a powerful, the desire for that security can become a powerful force that, can potentially kind of override what you're actually getting out of the relationship. Or, the fears about your like love or interest being reciprocated can be overwhelming. And I think that happens to a lot of people all the time in most relationships, as far as most poly relationships, maybe.
It's interesting. I would say early on in our opening up, I experienced that so much. It was like actually every single relationship that I had, big, small, short, long, were completely overwhelmed by those feelings. I just felt like I was constantly navigating that kind of feeling of limerence, the like fear that it wasn't safe, that I liked someone more than they liked me, that they liked me more than I liked them, that I was going to put myself in some kind of emotional or physical danger. It was just like it was like 75% of the experience was just that. And people who've listened to the podcast now since the beginning will know that I spent a lot of time early on being like, I may not like this. And I think like a lot of people kind of like, well, if you don't like those push-pull feelings, if you don't like those butterflies, if you don't like the kind of emotional courage and physical courage this requires, maybe you're just monogamous. And I was like, maybe I am. I don't know. Like, do other people like this? Is this like what people are looking for?
I mean, I do think that it is the compelling force for a lot of people who are new to non-monogamy.
Yeah.
And thus a large portion of the people who you would find like on field or something like that. Like, because it's so novel, especially for people who are in, long-term monogamous relationships, to like go back into that realm and like have that feeling again anew. There are definitely like a lot of people, and like really no shade necessarily, but shade that you should interrogate, that can be a driving force, right? A motivator.
What do you think? I mean, I could have this wrong, but I am curious. It feels like in the beginning you didn't experience a ton of that anxiety, but that has become more a feature of your experience recently.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there are a couple possible answers. I think one, having had the experience enough times of relationships abruptly ending,
Yes.
that like there's some like sort of lowercase t trauma there.
Like
of,
attachment trauma with
building connection with somebody, and that, I felt good about, or that I was like getting gratification out of, and then that like ending very abruptly because of sort of what felt like external factors. So that's one. And I think that's in some ways like the danger of dating people who are in a new like relationship orientation. For instance, dating people who are new to polyamory, like it's quite possible.
Also, I think people ending long established relationships, that there can be some risk of
and then
that just being like it's a new world, and you might be a really exciting feature of that new world, and then you might be jettisoned from that new world. And I know that that's an experience both of us have had.
So that, and then also, my attachment figures, my dad dying, my mom not being like someone who can care for me in the same way as she was historically. Like that's a big change that doesn't feel like it's like not directly related, but I have to think that it is, kind of psychically related on like a deeper level, that like, feeling like less secure and more like the fear of abandonment because,
You've experienced it. Yeah. Or at least the leaving of an attachment figure, or the severing of that relationship.
Thanks for asking, I guess.
Well, I mean, I part ask because I think it always intersects with what's happening with your larger world.
Right.
And so for me, in the beginning of non-monogamy, I was going through so much existential upheaval with my own parents, who were, I would say, damaging to the point of rupture our relationship over me coming out as queer. I was changing professions. I was becoming a parent myself. I was, there was like a lot. I was like learning to become an attachment therapist.
Right.
So there was a lot of just kind of activation in that realm. And then you threw new romantic relationships on top of that. And I was just like I feel like I was in a washing machine all the time. My little nervous system was. And so I feel like that begs the question of, are there other ways of doing this? And I know that we can't extract emotional risk and hurt from intimacy and attachment. The reason why it matters to us is because there are stakes there.
Right.
And I don't want to just like flatten the stakes.
Yeah.
But I am curious, like, what are some tools or approaches or lenses or ways of thinking about this that can help us feel a little more empowered in the way we experience this, and like we have more choice, and like we can be more collaborative with people? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know that this is a tool exactly, but a mitigating factor to this challenge would be like the community that you are in, and like the support that you have around you, not just in reference to the relationship specifically, but just like your need for somebody else to, just like reciprocate your feelings and like to take care of you and affirm you and stuff like that. Like those are all things that other relationships can do. And the more those other relationships, and I think they can even be other romantic relationships in a polyamorous context, or they can be, any kind of relationships like community, family, whatever.
I would throw in your relationship to yourself. Because when we're talking about attachment, especially as adults, that I think that is what we are yearning for, is to improve our relationship to ourselves and our sense of being like safely attached to ourselves.
I don't know if it's more rude to tell people that the solution is to have more community around them, or to tell them to be more in better relationship with themselves. Both of those
It's
things
all rude.
fucking hard
It's
to
all
do.
rude. It's all rude. And it's rude because we don't live in a culture, as we were talking about at the top of this podcast, we don't live in a culture that encourages either of those things.
Right.
And we don't necessarily know how to do it. And for those of us who come from families where there was a lot of emotional dysregulation, not good communication around these kinds of things, it can feel like we're learning all of this new alone.
But point being, if you don't have that stuff, if you haven't worked some of that stuff out, then you're going to be more likely to get pulled into a dysregulated romantic relationship where you're playing out all of the things that we're talking about. And that will be both uncomfortable and hard, and also will probably not end well.
I also think it speaks to why the time arcs of romantic relationships are so different, and why I have always been really resistant to them. So I ask this question, and everybody is like, you're being a dummy on purpose. But I'm like, why is the arc of a romantic relationship, like the time arc, so much shorter than any other kind of relationship? Why is there an expectation that I would meet someone I didn't know at all, right? Tell them my deepest, darkest secrets, get naked with them, smash our bodies together, do all this push-pull, like make our nervous systems interact with each other, and like, you should probably do it within the first 6 dates. And I'm just like, that is fucking bonkers. You know, I have all of these friendships where, frankly, a lot of my friendships, we have done all of those things I just described in some way, shape, or form, but just over much, much longer arcs with each other. And I'm not trying to say that friendships and romantic relationships are the same, although a little bit from a relationship anarchist perspective, I might be. But I do think it's an interesting question when we're asking about like tools and things to be mindful of and thoughtful about, and like how we can care for ourselves and each other. Is that pressure to move really fast towards that kind of nervous system entwinement.
Yeah, and I think that's because there's this sort of like vicious cycle of the like limerence butterflies feeling and the desire to end at a place where you're safe, right? And like that will motivate you to expend a lot of energy in trying to get there.
Right.
Basically, it's like it's fun, it feels good, and then or it can be fun and can feel good. And Sarah's face, no, it's not.
I don't think it's fun.
People find it. People get something out of it. Obviously, they do it a lot. And then you're getting to a place where you're like, safe now. I want to get there as fast as possible, right? Mm-hmm. Even though maybe then you're like, oh, hello, darkness, my old friend.
Well, a little bit because the safety that you're chasing is a false safety, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not. I mean, to your point about community or my point about your relationship to yourself, polyamory, I am drawn to it because it interrupts the idea that there is just a person out there who's going to like click with you in this way and solve all of your fucking attachment anxiety and make you feel like you belong in this world and that you're not constantly at risk of being abandoned.
Yeah.
The reason why I struggle with that is not because I haven't found the person I click with. The reason why I struggle with that is because of the family I come from and the culture I live in. And the solution to that is not limerence with 6 different people, right? It's something else that I haven't figured out.
Yeah. Tune in next time.
I really thought by the end of that I would have come up with the answer, but I didn't.
You started the sentence and then
I
you're
was like, I know I'm going to have something by the end of this, and I really didn't. So yeah, what else? Tools, lenses, ways to like disrupt this and still feel like we get to have romance in our lives.
I mean, I like that last question. We were going to talk about mistakes that we've made in this realm, and I think we really kind of have already, and I think they're kind of the same for both of us and maybe for everyone, is just like trying to romance people to win them over without checking in on like whether you actually care about the relationship and want to be in a relationship with them in a
and like want to make it together.
Yeah.
Want to make the relationship together.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely something that I have done a lot in the non-monogamous context, especially at the beginning when you're just like, oh, I can do this new thing. I can like find out if people like me. And then that is not an end in and of itself, but it can feel like one.
Yeah.
What do you think? What about for you?
I think similarly, it's like I like to think that I have the ability to kind of identify who people want me to be. And then really cultivate that part of my character and personality for them And then that actually tends to isolate me in the relationship because I feel like their interest in me and their care is entirely dependent on that character, that version of me that I'm performing for them. And I can't disrupt it for fear that then I'll be abandoned, you know? And so I think it's like, for me, being able to express parts of myself that I don't get to express the same way and like more hold it down grown up areas of my life. Like I do want to be a little more like wild and impulsive and, you know, I don't know, like even just being like brainy, you know, intellectual, political, like just kind of being passionate, I think, in big ways. And also to build a relationship with people, they need to know like what my girlfriend found out about me over Pride, which is if you're going to know me, you're going to know that 5 mornings out of 7, I'm going to wake up having a mild panic attack. And you're going to have to sit there and fucking listen to me talk about all the things I'm anxious about while I counterintuitively drink 15 cups of coffee. I mean, you don't have to do that, but I will be doing it, and you'll likely be in the room.
If you want to be my lover, you have got to.
Right.
Blah, 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 all that stuff you just.
And that's not like, you know, early on in getting to know her. I mean, I feel like she and I have done a pretty good job of this, but early on, I kind of imagined that she liked me because I was like younger and kind of wild and like was like really confident emotionally. I was like a therapist and like I didn't have a bunch of like drama, like baby drama like that. But you know, I just thought that she wanted me to be like really cool, calm, and collected in those ways. And so I sort of hid those parts of myself from her for a long time. And we'll see, jury's out, how she was very kind. She just ordered me breakfast, which
How romantic.
good reminder that I should probably eat when I feel
Well,
romantic.
and okay, so back to your question a second ago, like maybe that is one of those alternative things that you can do is like care, where you see the other person and what they need and care for them. And I don't think that Ione Skye needed John Cusack to play Peter Gabriel out of a boombox in the middle of the night. Like that wasn't taking care of her. That was a gesture that was about himself.
Right.
But Cassandra needed that interview with Frank Sharp.
That's right.
And Wayne did that as a gesture of care
For her.
because he really knew her and knew what her goals were. And he was like, how can I, rather than trying to like undermine you because I'm scared, how can I, help you pursue your goals and more be yourself? I'm getting chills.
Yeah.
Wayne's
seriously.
World. Wow.
Goosebumps.
So good. And Benjamin and Elaine were young boomers, young white rich boomers, so completely out of touch with their own emotional lives and unable to communicate it to themselves
they were
or
just
each other.
breaking free of the shackles of the suburbs, what they were being told to do.
Plastics.
Yeah.
Free to be
Plastics,
rich.
God. And you know what? After we're all gone, that's what will remain.
It's true.
Plastics.
Plastics.
Plastics are eternal. So we can develop a safe attachment to plastics because they will
yeah,
never leave us.
definitely.
Yeah.
Secure attachment.
We can have a secure attachment to the microplastics.
Except for
all
the
around
plastic that is the top of the Tupperware, which will always
always
leave us.
leave.
Never securely attached.
Oh my God.
Wow. That was a lot.
Well, did we crack it?
I think that we've started to, in a way, I was joking as we were talking about the topic for this podcast, that we are always talking about some version of the same thing through the lens of romance and limerence, or through the lens of like love and community, or through the, and it's about what we want our relationships to feel like and whether or not we can develop the language for that so that we don't just take on whole cloth what the culture and other people tell us the relationship should feel
Well,
like.
and before we go, I do want to spend a second talking about like what is the way. it's not like romance is just a bad idea and doesn't
Or
have
always
anything
manipulative.
for us, or always manipulative.
Good
So
point.
what is the way to embody that in a secure relationship, like whether it's a long-term one or even a shorter-term one? Like, it's not like we're saying don't be romantic. Like, you know, it looks different, and probably different in a way. It's something to strive for, not in comparison to like toxic, limerent, you know, manipulative rom-com romantic gestures or whatever. Right? What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing that comes up for me is just like that question that an ex of yours asked, like, what do you yearn for? I think about it all the time, and I think it's such a good question, and I'm so grateful to her for bringing it into my life. And I think I yearn to be like seen, and for other people to be interested in me, in part because I am deeply, deeply interested in other people. And I think an insecurity that I have is that I won't be matched. Right? So I think that kind of like curiosity about me and my emotional life, and then like letting me feel safe expressing that and back, is a big way that things feel romantic to me. I think asking people what they want or need and being able to communicate that in turn is really important.
Or
And
being able
feels-
to anticipate it because you know them well enough.
But I almost would say that expectation of that anticipation piece is, I think that can get iffy. You know, I love the idea of people knowing each other so well that you know that like I should eat something when I'm having a panic attack in the morning, right? And then also I'm thinking about recent experiences I've had with new people who didn't know me very well.
Yeah.
Who like thought they knew what I wanted, and then went and
But they just were serving the limerent object.
did it. And I was like, God, I wish you had just talked to me and asked me what I wanted, because that would have been very romantic to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also think it's romantic to be able to ask for something like, how many times a day will I be like, will you put your hand on my back? Right? And I don't think that it's less romantic that I ask for it and you do it than if you just somehow divined that that's what I needed.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far on this tangent, but that is definitely a challenge for previous versions of myself.
I know.
Maybe men.
Maybe, yeah.
I've definitely heard other men be
Yeah.
like, well, if they told me to do the thing, then it's like,
Right.
then it doesn't count.
I think that's a toxic
It comes up,
romance
right?
message.
Yeah.
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 There's the whole thing about flowers.
And then
Had
it's
good
Being a
friends.
mind reader.
inauthentic. Yeah, being a mind reader. Right. And if you're trying to read somebody's mind, you probably don't think that their mind has a lot going on in it.
Right.
Right.
Or that it's just a sort of objectified mind.
Yeah.
That is an iteration on every other romantic object out there.
And you
Yeah.
probably just, the end game is getting that objectified mind to fold your laundry for you.
So, and I think the other thing I would just say is, finding some tension between a presence to what is happening in a relationship right now and like being able to enjoy and appreciate it without like blowing through it, trying to get to that safe destination that you
Yeah.
described, which I actually don't think exists in the way that we're hoping it will.
No,
you know,
because what you
Safety
want
island.
is to be free
Safety island.
and the other person to be free, and for you both to be there because of the things that you get out of the relationship, you know, like especially in a polyamorous context. So yeah, don't undermine that, right? Like
Right.
just
Be curious about it as it's happening, be noticing it, recognizing that we're not trying to make this into something. We get to just experience it as it happens. And I think balancing that with like having intentionality around what you want to make together. And talking about that.
Yeah.
And not having it be this unspoken power exchange,
Yeah.
but actually like a spoken collaborative experience, which I think, I mean, I feel like every time I say that, I'm like, and that's so romantic. And I'm like, does anybody want to date me?
You're so
See, I
right.
feel like maybe I wouldn't want to date myself if I heard
This
myself
is
saying
really
some of this
helpful to me in just thinking about like how relationships where that security is there, or like not just the security, but like the co-creation and the understanding of each other sometimes don't have the same like energy. They don't evoke the same energy in me that a new relationship that's not secured
Exactly.
does.
Limerence.
And like, yeah, what's up with that?
That's, I think, potentially a bad sign. And I'm saying this is like completely counter to every message I've ever received. So I'm open to hearing that I'm getting this wrong. But I think it is so curious and interesting to consider the possibility that we're getting it right. And that like that those feelings of excitement and insecurity are not a good sign. They're a bad sign.
Yeah. Right. But then you're like, everybody's like, trust yourself and your own feelings and follow your heart. Bad advice.
No, but maybe there's something there, and it's about like knowing our nervous systems. Like maybe your nervous system is telling you that you're excited about someone, and it's also telling you like listen to yourself, like go a little bit slow, like make sure that you feel safe as you pursue this. Like maybe it can be both things at once.
Yeah.
And it's not a either or.
I like the idea that we would become like totalitarian dictators, and we would censor all media so that like you couldn't listen to songs that evoked this feeling as something transcendent.
But I mean, I love those songs. Can I be really clear about this? I want you all to know, like, I love that music and a lot of those movies too. You know?
But satin sheets are very romantic. But what happens when you're not in bed? You know?
The cat pukes on them?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And then who cleans it up? And the answer to that, very romantic.
Yes.
Very, very romantic.
Well, thank you, Sarah and
Thank
Jessica.
Thank you.
So a hot, steamy episode, mostly just because it's really, really hot in here.
Also very sexy. Very, very sexy.
Very sexy. And I really appreciated exploring this. And I suspect this is like the beginning of us talking about this.
Yeah,
in
I
new
mean,
ways,
I want to talk about how
not
this
the end.
plays into like casual sex.
Yeah.
For sure. And also sex. We could do an episode where we talk about sex.
I'm thinking casual sex, long-term sex,
Formal sex.
formal sex.
Just kidding. I'm sure there are other. Help me out here. What else is on the list other than sex?
I think it has to do with all kinds of relationships, attachment, and intimacy, for sure. Of course, you're like, let's talk about sex, and I'm like, let's apply it to politics. I mean, like, we're headed into an election year, and I feel like there's something about some of these, like, toxic savior scripts that might be relevant.
Huh. Yeah. I would love for somebody to come and romance me in the political realm.
God, actually,
Political
we
butterflies?
should be so
Can
lucky
you
as to be
imagine?
toxically romanced
Yeah.
by someone in the political sphere.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is. We can't even hope for that.
Nope.
Anyway, I'm done.
Okay.
Sex. We'll talk about sex, I promise.
Yeah, that'll be easy.
Thank you for listening to Mistakes Were Made. Find us on Instagram. We'll put some stuff on there.
I swear it will.
Sarah will. At Mistakes Cast. And check out our new logo. And
Butts.
butts. Find us. Find our butts out in the world. And give us feedback, input, whatever you like. We love it when we get emails from people at on our Instagram or at mistakescast@gmail.com.
Thanks, everyone. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
I love you.
Love you. Do you love me?